And now British police investigating last week's terrorist attack near Parliament, which killed 4 people, have arrested another suspect. Metropolitan Police say a 30-year-old man has been apprehended in the central English city of Birmingham on suspicion of preparing the terrorist acts. In a statement, police said they arrested a total of 12 people in connection with the attack, but 9 were released with no further action. Earlier, Home Secretary Amber Rudd said the intelligence services must have access to encrypted social messaging services. Perpetrator of the attack in Westminster, a British-born Khalid Masood, is believed to have used messaging app WhatsApp on the same day. However, rights groups say accessing social media messages amounts to spying and intrusion of people's privacy. And now we're joined out of Coromandel, New Zealand by Mr. Tony Gosling, investigative journalist. Hello, Tony, and thanks for joining us back on the program once again. And now, Tony, I mean, okay, so we hear a lot of people blaming refugees a lot of times for these kinds of attacks, but a lot of them have been homegrown people born on British soil. And the funny thing is this gentleman, you know, he traveled to Saudi Arabia multiple times, went there, came back. Many people don't know if he's radicalized there. But then I want you to address that, the fact that it's a UK ally that he traveled onto the soil of and came back, possibly got radicalized there. If not, a lot of these young men are radicalized via the internet, and Amber Rudd wants to put a stop to that and curb terrorists and the radicalization on social media. If you can, broad that cover spectrum, that broad spectrum I just mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, they're saying that Khalid Masood was radicalised in jail. This is quite serious if it's true. It's very similar, of course, to what happened to the killers of Lee Rigby back in 2013. They were in jail in Kenya, and the security services actually sprung them from jail, brought them back to Britain, where they were then able to kill Lee Rigby. Very close connections between this guy. Very close connections between this guy and the security services. So what Amber Rudd has been saying, the Home Secretary, today, is that WhatsApp, it appears to have been being used by this guy in the run-up to the attack. Now, at the same time, she's also saying that he apparently was a lone wolf. Now, if he's been communicating with other people in the run-up to the attack, then, of course, he's not a lone wolf. So her logic just doesn't add up. Also, the WikiLeaks, just the Vault 7 from a couple of weeks ago, they revealed there that the National Security Agency and GCHQ have actually developed malware to target WhatsApp. And so that if this guy, as he was known to the security services, surely they would have been targeting his WhatsApp. All they need to do is pick up the phone to the Americans at the National Security Agency, and they can say, well, what has he been saying? And yet what they're trying to do is just get rid of people being able to use any kind of encryption. This has been an agenda that's been going on for about 20 years now, ever since the release of PGP, Pretty Good Privacy, to allow people to have private conversations. But when Amber Rudd says you can't have terrorists talking to each other, this is a really ridiculous statement, because, of course, most terrorists, 99%, never use the internet. They would talk to each other off the internet, and they know that everything's under surveillance, so they would never leave a trace there. But this is just one of the big questions about this attack last week, which is not even being asked, let alone answered. Most importantly, I think, is BBC's Daniel Sandford, who has reported eyewitnesses saying that there was a bald white man possibly in the car with Khalid Masood, the assailant. And there are all sorts of other reasons, having switched off the Westminster CCTV cameras just a few months before, and also having the Parliament gates wide open and reducing the level of security on Parliament, whilst the security services are saying that there is a very high level of threat. So there's a lot of questions about this attack last week, which are not, as I say, not being asked. Certainly not being answered. And the most important, I think, is that the British police have got a shoot-to-kill policy so that there are no questions in court after the attack.
But, Tony, why is there no attention being drawn on the fact that this man lived and worked in Saudi Arabia twice, and just a couple years, less than a year ago, visited there for a third time before coming back and carrying out this attack?
Well, it's the same reason as there's very little attention being drawn to the fact that the hijackers on 9/11 were actually Saudi Arabian citizens, most of them. It's because it's a very embarrassing truth that the Wahhabi faith, which has been nurtured with help from the Americans and the British in Saudi Arabia, is at the heart of the war on terror. It's really the reason why propaganda against the Islamophobic propaganda has been able to catch fire since the start of the war on terror, since 9/11, is Wahhabism and this very perverted, twisted, radical form of Islam. Rather like, actually, if you go back to the English Civil War hundreds of years ago, the Puritans, who were supposed Christians, but then went round executing people because they didn't totally agree with their faith. So these kinds of fake religion, this kind of thing has been going on for centuries, and it's a tool that's used to divide and rule. And that's exactly what the Western Empire has been doing since the beginning of the war on terror.
Thank you much, Tony, for joining us. I don't know what you're doing out there in Coromandel, New Zealand, but it's none of my business. Hope you're having a good time out there. Thanks for joining us once again. That was our investigative journalist, Tony Gosling, joining us out of Coromandel, New Zealand.